before slowly releasing it into the air. "Does it not bother you, Dad?" Amy piped up, her attention momentarily distracted from her phone as she studied him. "The horrible photos, all the stuff printed on those packets showing the harm it can do." Coupland stared into the distance, thought of the countless cases he'd worked on, the crime scene photos depicting the numerous ways each victim had met their untimely death. A cigarette didn't feature in any of them. He gave silent thanks that in Amy's world, the greatest threat to his life was smoking, rather than the killers he came in contact with more times than he cared to ponder. The cocoon he'd created around his family remained intact. They worried about his lungs and his diet like they were a normal little unit, like he was a bus driver or a teacher, rather than a detective sergeant in Salford Precinct's murder squad. He downplayed his role on every case that he'd worked on, did all he could to put their minds at rest. Amy's questions told him it worked. "It'll take more than a packet of cigarettes to finish me off, Ames," he quipped. "I'm like Wolverine, me, bloody indestructible." "You've got the werewolf bit right," Lynn observed, brushing her hand across his unshaven face. The familiar buzz in his pocket took the edge off his mood. Pulling his mobile phone from his jacket, he pulled a sorry face at Lynn as he barked his name into the phone. He hadn't switched it on more than 2 minutes since, and already he was needed. His face darkened as he listened to the person on the other end, grunting a response before slipping the phone into his pocket. "I'll walk you to the taxi rank." He took Lynn's case from her and wheeled it with his own, his mood somber. "Something's come up." Leaving the airport and driving along the slip road that would take him onto the M56, Coupland turned on the radio. More bad news about the refugee crisis, people trapped in a collapsed building in India. At least on the radio you were safe from the graphic images. The tragic photos and videos bandied about the internet like disaster porn. It didn't make any sense why people clicked onto those sites, why folk would choose to look horror in the eye, experience close up someone else's tragedy. Coupland pulled the e-cigarette Lynn had bought him out of his pocket, eyeing it with suspicion. "It's time you started to cut down, Kev," she'd wheedled. It wasn't the first time she'd said this, but there was a steely look in her eye when she'd spoken, as though he wasn't going to get off as lightly this time around, especially now you're getting to that age. He'd bristled at that. "I'm at the top of my game," he'd objected, but they both knew that wasn't true. His bulk was genetic, a bullying father who'd only stopped knocking 7 bells out of him once he'd outgrown him. He'd never played sport, was an avid spectator though, rugby, football, pretty much anything that could be broadcast via Sky into his local. The pies and pints had taken their toll. His bulky frame was starting to soften. Lynn had put them both on a low-fat diet, and to be fair, he was feeling the benefit. He might not be able to take on Usain Bolt in a sprint, but he could still hold his own in a dark alleyway if the situation called for it. There was a place for healthy living, he was sure of it, but didn't you have to believe the future was worth it? Coupland pushed the mawkish thoughts to the back of his mind. The jet lag had made him maudlin. His holiday already receding into the past, he took a puff on his vapour stick out of loyalty to Lynn. To think she worried about his health after all she'd been through. He puffed some more. Coupland parked his car, shivering as he climbed out of it, whether from the change in temperature now he was back in Salford, or from what he was about to see, he wasn't sure. He stepped towards the cordoned-off area where a uniformed officer stood guard. The officer nodded, lifted the cordon to let him pass. The information he'd gleaned from the earlier call had been sketchy. A body had been found in an area of woodland along the perimeter of a recreation park in Worsley. By the level of activity going on, it had been discovered a couple of hours ago. That and the number of press cars circling the areas like vultures smelling carrion. The crime scene manager leaned against the driver's door of his car as he made a call. He nodded at Coupland, watching as the detective took a pair of shoe protectors from the open car boot and slipped them on. He clamped his hand over the phone. "Didn't know you were back," he tutted. "No bugger tells me anything." Coupland grunted. "A bit of shut-eye would have been nice." A blonde-haired, slim-built man appeared through a clearing, signalled for Coupland to make his way over. "Good holiday?" DCI Malander asked as a courtesy, already turning and heading towards the locus before Coupland had time to answer. Coupland grunted once more, his mouth forming a grim line. It never got easier observing the dead, especially when their exit had been violent. "It looks like